I made this bass guitar setup video as short as I can, and this is in the order in which it's performed. You need to do this, check the screws, do strings, truss rod adjustment, saddle adjustment for the string action height, nut slot to file or not to file them, the intonation, and then finally the pickup height. Tools you need a screwdriver, a truss rod wrench, you need your feeler gauges, you need Allen keys, you need the string action gauge, a radius gauge, and a capo. I'm going to turn this up real quick just to show you. On the back, if you notice, it has a neck plate with 4 bolts. So the first thing you tighten, make sure it's tight, is the neck bolts. They go through the neck plate, through the body, and into the neck that sits into the neck pocket itself. Make sure that the bridge screws are tight and that they're flush. Usually these don't back out and you usually never have a problem with them. Make sure that the tuner screws are tight and secure. They hold the string posts. Check that the bass screws on the tuners are tight. Now these were loose and the whole assembly actually shifted, and they were shifting back and forth. So don't over tighten these screws though, because you don't want to strip the holes. So the next step is to check the neck radius. Now we're assuming already that you've already taken the strings off and that we can get to the fretboard. You take the radius gauge and we check what the actual radius of the fretboard is. This one is actually 7.25. You need to remember it because we're going to need to know what the radius is later on when we adjust the string heights. Now, the next step is to install strings. And if you have a rosewood fingerboard, at this point I would first oil it up and refresh it and make sure that it's not dried out. Well, now you tune your strings. This is actually E, A, D, G. So the next step is to do the truss rod. So for the truss rod, we're going to need the truss rod tool, the capo, and we're going to need the feeler gauge for this, these 3 items. Now this is called adjusting the relief, a slight curve of the neck. You'll hear me mention from time to time an underbow. You have 3 conditions: a straight neck, a convex, or a concave. You want it slightly concave, a slight underbow. Convex means it's bending down, that's no good, and a straight neck normally does not work. We put the capo, we install that up here in this fashion, okay, and it must press the E string down on the 1st fret. Then we hold down at the 12th fret and we measure at the 6th fret, that's the B flat. So you have 3 conditions on the adjustment. You have a no touch, a touch, or a light touch. We're going to go for the light touch. That's going to give us the underbow, the actual concave condition that we want with the neck. Now if you have to make adjustments with you, which you probably will, to either tighten or loosen the truss rod, you need to loosen up your strings while you do this, and then you'll have to tighten them back up and tune up all the strings again and check it again. And you keep doing that until you get the right underbow. The more you do it, the better you get, the quicker you get. Okay, so our next step is 6. We're gonna adjust the string action height. You're gonna need the string action gauge and some Allen keys to adjust the saddles up or down. So what we do is we take a look at this gauge and you'll see that there's a key here to give you the actual string heights that you desire. Now we're doing a bass guitar, not an acoustic or an electric. And there's a star here on the medium low, and that's a good place and a good height to adjust your strings. It happens to be 0.085 for the low string and then 0.075 for the high string. And you'll see how that's accomplished as we lay this down at the 12th fret, and we'll see the height. Now this is also up in a playing position. You need to look down underneath this, and what we do is when we place it there, we actually press down at the 1st fret to bring it down to the mark. Now if it's high, we lower the saddle. If it's low, we raise the saddle. After we do that, we want to make sure that these two outer strings, once they're set to the height you desire, that there's no buzzing on any fret. If there is buzzing, you need to take this gauge, same one, and you can check, you could use these 3 sides, and you need to rock it back and forth with 3 frets to see if there's any high or low frets. When we get up to the top, you'll use a longer section as the frets spread out. So there's no buzzing. So now we need to meet the 2 center strings to the 2 outer strings, and we're going to need the radius gauge for that. Remember, we took a measurement here and we found that the neck radius was 7.25. So we want to follow that same arc. What we do is we put this gauge about 1/4 of an inch in front of the saddles, and then what we raise or lower these 2 center ones to meet the radius. Now, when you press this down, a proper setting is where it's pressing on the string and they actually dull out a little bit. And then you know you have the right radius. If you hear this sustained longer than the others, that means it's too low, so we bring it up until it meets, and we have a little friction on each one of them. And that's how we do that. So then that's how we set the strings to make them playable to the radius of the neck. So we need to measure the distance between the string and the 1st fret. And if they're too high, it's going to make it harder to play the 1st note on the bass. So if they are, then we need to shave the nut slot. A word of precaution, if you do overfile these slots, the only way to really fix that properly is then to replace the wire nut and start again. Because if you file these wrong, the notes won't be on when you do the intonation. How we're going to do that is, while it's tuned to the proper notes, we're going to use a nut height gauge. And this gauge has a thicker and a thinner feeler gauge. The thicker one is to check the E and the A, and then the thinner one is to check the D and the G strings. What we do is we just slip it in and we actually check to see how close it is or how high or if it's precise. And what we want is to get it as close as possible. Now, if you do overfile these nut slots, because if it's really high, it's going to be harder to play at the 1st fret, and then we need to file at the nut slot. Now what I usually do is I will remove the string and we take the file. Now I have a set of files here for every size slot. This one fits the E string. It's rounded on the bottom, so this way we get a nice beautiful half a moon in here, so we could rest the string nicely in there. And what we want to do is we want to file on a back down towards the back, and we want an angle because we want the string to actually pretty much stop at the edge of the wire nut, because we're going to do the intonation and we want to control from the edge of the wire nut to where it lays into the groove of the saddle down at the bridge. And then that's how we're going to get all of our notes perfect on the fingerboard. Now the other thing you could do here, just to check sometimes when I just pick up a guitar, I will notice how I'm tightening it out of the slot, and then I lay it back into the slot because I don't want to have a string shave the nut slot, as I mentioned before, because if you keep changing your strings and you do that, eventually you're going to shave this slot a little more and a little more and a little more, and before you know it, it's too low.
So the other thing you could do is sometimes, and I do this while the bass is in upright position, I hold down at the 3rd fret and then I check the distance just by listening. So as you can hear, it's really, really close to that. And that's it. And make sure that you tape the wood so when you're filing, you do not damage the headstock. I just put this masking tape on just to show you how to tape it. I would use a thicker tape actually, because you could go right through this. All right, let's move to the intonation.
So the next step, number 9, is intonation. What we need is a screwdriver and we need a toner, because we need to make sure that all of our notes are precise. I think this is on. And that's what we're going to do. We need to make sure, remember we said this is an E, A, D, G. We need to make sure that they're all proper and every note it falls on is right. So this is how we do that. Now this can be tricky and this can be timely, but this bass is done. We need to fine tune this, and by adjusting the saddles, either forward or back. Now, first what we need to do is we need to tune this to the harmonic of the string. How do we do that? Well, when we play, let's say this A open, right? I press down on this fret and then I have an A. Well, the harmonic is, we don't press down, we just lightly touch that string right on top of that fret. And that's the harmonic. So what we do is we tune this string to the harmonic and we get it settled in, and then we check it when we press it down that it's the same note. Now if it's flat, because it can be flat here at this position, remember we're doing it as an open string harmonic, and then we're going to do it as a closed string. So if it's flat, we move the saddle forward. If it's sharp, we move it back. Now once you get that, you want to check and make sure that every note, C, D, E, G, A, that every note is right and it comes up correctly on the tuner. So we do each string, and that's our intonation. That's how we get it. Well, the last step here is to adjust the pickup heights. What we need is a screwdriver and the string action gauge. If you notice on the string action gauge, we also have a pickup height measurement. And for the bass pickups, it's going to be 3/32 of an inch height from the pickup to the bottom of the string. So now to do this, what we're going to do is we are going to press down at the last fret, and we're going to measure. We're going to look down to see the lines from through the body and the strings to get an accurate measurement. Now I don't rest this on the actual pickup cover. I rest it on the pole pieces, and that's how I get my pickup height. So what I do here is you press down and then you read that. Now what you need to do here is make sure that it's 3/32 on this side and 3/32 on this side. And then we go to move to the back pickup and we do the same thing. 3/32, 3/32. Now realize that the string moves more out here than it does closer to the saddle. So that's why this pickup is raised higher than this one, because the string gets more aggressive closer to me where I'm pressing it down. And so by doing this, it's going to assure us that the volume across the strings is even. And that's why we do it. Now if your pickups are too low, you're going to have low volume. If they're too high, it might cause the sound to become raunchy. And, you know, we want a nice sounding bass. So that's it. There you have it. Those are your 10 steps. We're done. and good success. Thanks for watching.